All right, so to continue off of where we left off, it's been a little bit of a cut because I was trying to fix up the privacy graphic and then something happened. So either this is going to be a separate upload on a separate Thursday. So if that is the case, and I'm not sure if it is, but if it is, then welcome back. But we'll be talking a little bit about a certain topic relating to the usual Thursday series, which is focused more so on providing insight and general information about how crowd behavior tends to navigate through time and space, how people and population, individuals try to acquire sources of power, oftentimes at the expense of those maybe a little bit either less well informed, or they themselves are not informed about what kind of damage they themselves can cause to others. And of course, you can still know what people are like and what you yourself are capable of, and still have the intention to do undue harm to others. But this is more so, this project is coming from the perspective of trying to, I don't know if educate is the right word, but it's definitely meant to provide information, almost like expose a little bit of the dirtier sides of humanity to those who maybe are not fully aware of how truly awful people can be, including ourselves, of course. But of course, there are people who understand that side of themselves and try to regulate it and not completely suppress it, but apply it in the right settings, right? There are appropriate times where you can, take part in some, pride and aggression, even violence, as long as it's within the right nuance, context, appropriate time and setting, delivery, audience, and so examples of these that I listed in a previous episode, if this is going to be separate from that, are going to involve things like, for example, a comedy show, where you can basically make crack whatever jokes when you have a nightclub, right, where you expect slightly flirtatious behavior and fights to break out, like competitive sports games, when you're at like a football game and you're shouting across, like fuck Chicago or whatever, there's banter, that's sports banter. Anyone engages that, it's an acknowledged crowd setting. Could be within a closed private setting inside a household where you're not taking on the public, but it's between some close group of friends, or you and your in-laws and your spouse, and you have this like generalized social cues where you're just like ripping on each other for fun. It could also be, that's like 4 examples. Another one could be, at an underground rap battle scene, right, where everyone's just spitting bars meant to diss each other out. And most, it's that aggression, is that hunger that you need, right? So that's another example. So there are many examples where you're allowed to, even like constructive criticism, it's negative, but it's meant to benefit each party. It's meant to, inform the other of things they can improve on. So there's like 6 examples and more, right? It's all about context, timing, right? And the general theme here is to not do those things in the appropriate settings for the most part. For example, at a workplace where you have a lot, or at a certain time in the workplace where you have a lot of work that needs to get done, or in the general public where you have a large group of people who, it's such an heterogeneous mixture of people with many different values and different types of cultural sensitivities, and what is appropriate and what kinds of advantages each have over each other, that you can't treat everyone uniformly. And so in a general public, it wouldn't be appropriate. At a workplace setting, might not be appropriate. It wouldn't be appropriate at a library where it's expected everyone's just to go there to work and be quiet. Right? So it's all about setting, timing, place. But I gave like 7 examples already of where it is appropriate. And this entire series, which is like one subset and shared goals and concepts, ideas, analogies. One series of these analogies, concepts, and approaches, and so on and so forth, specific to Project Jira, is aimed for on every Thursday on informing those who are usually, maybe not as well informed, maybe for whatever reason, maybe just haven't been in a large metropolitan city and don't know what it's like to be, targeted, or maybe by a flash mob of people, or by a group of individuals, or by a specific individual in such a hostile, malicious, sadistic, narcissistic, psychopathic kind of manner, usually at your expense, for their own amusement or insecurities, or for their fears, or which translates to paranoia. Sometimes people just pick on you because they think that they see something in you that threatens them, and you might not be doing anything. So it's really to inform those who might be on the receiving end of such behavior and don't know what to do about it. So it could be the young, it could be older who have, maybe lived lives where they haven't experienced before. It's not so much this particular series of the project isn't usually meant for people who are the perpetrators, although if you're a perpetrator, I'm not going to shy away from saying, I clearly don't appreciate people like that. But some people do it out of naivety and don't know. And if you're willing to change, then great. But there's a lot of people who usually, when they do these things, they know what they're doing, and they have no desire to change, in which case we're very open here, right? We say on this channel, bully to bullies, slander to slanderers. It's like basically fuck you. Then we're not going to, we're definitely not going to hold back on that sentiment. We are meant here to support the right people, and not, support people doing horrible things to generally good-natured people, right? And so with that in mind, the context provided, let's just dive right into the topic, because the previous episode kind of got cut off a little bit, and I had to restart it recording, which is fine because I kind of talked for almost 20 minutes. And so what I'm going to talk about now is, two things have changed. I mentioned, the backdrop, but also the style of a Thursday is probably going to involve probably one or two or more multiple sources of topic material that involve, again, crowd behavior, social phenomenon, social dynamics, social contagion, specifically. And, things that you can do to kind of help yourself at least be on the same playing field, right? To be able to fight back, right? Eye for eye, tit for tat, or avoid it, or resort to stoicism, resort to meditative practices, resort to, searching professional help, legal help, policing enforcement, and so on and so forth. None of this advice, none. It's just sharing information. It could be personal experiences, it could be storytelling, it could be things that are really useful based off of, case examples. Okay? And a lot of this will happen through conversations as well. And so that's what we have here, right? That's one of the sources here for today. Is going to be on a YouTube video, but it's not the YouTube video itself. It's about the conversation I've had with another individual responding to an original post. And we're going to outline some arguments and opinions and disagreements and consensuses that were reached between me and this other person. And I'm going to say, obviously, we don't see things eye to eye, that's for sure, and that's okay, right? I feel like it's nice to have a conversation with this person because he's grounded me in some ways, and I think also been able to ground him in some ways as well. But at the same time, or her, I'm not sure if it's I don't really know if it's him or her. But the point is, it's through conversation like this that we can kind of de-escalate certain situations and circumstances. And even if we don't have to fully agree, and we're not supposed to, because that'd be kind of a really boring world, right? Imagine when we all just agree on the same principles. It's not. That just sucks. You need a little bit of chaos. You need a little bit of destruction. You need a little bit of disorder in this world. It serves so many different purposes, whether it stimulates growth, or brings about something excitement, or brings about something that at least reminds you it's a little bit even beneficial, pragmatic, because when you are shown something dirty, when you are, exposed to bullying or neglect or abuse or harassment or violence, right? Or ostracization or targeted, slander and so on and so forth. All this kind of stuff also it's not an excuse, and by no means is a good justification, but it does also, as one of the many other reasons, it also trains you, it gives you experience, and now I know what that is. You're familiar, it builds familiarity, and familiarity also allows you to therefore come up with solutions over time. You get more experience on how to deal with these types of mistreatment and behavior from others, or entire group of people, a certain small group of people, maybe an individual specifically, at different levels of relationships, whether someone's really close to you or just a total stranger. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to talk about here is going to be on a video called, I believe, it's actually quite negative. I'm not even sure I really want to read the title because it is somewhat relevant, but why the worst always win, right? It's about, and then the title is Nietzsche, Machiavelli, and the Dirty Game of Power. I think you can see this right now if I scroll it up, right? And the channel is Deadly Nightshade. Now again, keep this in mind, it is a Thursday series upload, and because it's a Thursday series upload, yeah, things can be a little bit negative. I just want to remind everyone that's a Thursday series thing. Sunday series usually are the opposite. They're very positive and uplifting, and things that are more objective tend to be Mondays, and they don't have any, on Mondays it's a lot of like casual talk about like more mundane things, and then it's all different, right? They're all different series. Each series will specialize and eventually might even become their own like separate channels or whatever. But at the end of the day, I just want to keep that in mind. It's not always so serious and macabre and somber and like, oh, it's such a gritty, grimy, almost like kind of edgy topic. People are picking on you. It's like, no. It's not always like this. It's just specific, again, to the context. Okay. So let's go further. I have to emphasize that because I know that my channel can come off as really like maybe a little bit too real, can come off a little bit too real. It's like when it's too real, it gets a little bit sad. So, all right. It's just a Thursday. All right, so let's go. It's just a Thursday. It's a weekly Thursday thing. But it does come with utility. So let's come down to the comment that started all of this. It didn't start all of this, but yeah, it kind of did. So here is and this is all public, right? So you can, I'm not going to shy away from actually giving usernames here, but Happy Camper here says on this video, narcissism and cluster B personalities are running rampant. Having conscience and empathy are becoming rare, right? And then there's a bunch of people here talking about it. Now I'm going to read a few other, there's some dialogue, right? Aside from the conversation I've had with this other person, which we'll get to in a moment. And again, I just told you what the general topic is about. Why do the worst always win in life? I think, hopefully now, unlike in 2020, when people were kind of naive, they kind of brainwashed in the 2010s, whether it's the new generations or the millennials like Gen Z and millennials, or even like older generations like X and whatever, or boomers, kind of like, well, boomers are always kind of negative. They never really bought into that kind of nonsense, the political, toxic positivity bullshit with DEI and crap like that, right? But now things are the opposite, right? Which is an opposite extreme where people are just there's no sense of human decency at all. It's just pure hostility, which is also not good, because now abuse, like public harassment and toxicity in general are just normalized, which is just also as bad. But anyways, so that's the general topic, right? It's like that, people are, one of the main topics here is that, as people have kind of like in the past 2020, 2025 have realized, going back into society, there's a lot of bullying, harassment, abuse, hostility, malice, narcissism, cluster B, paranoia, antisocial behaviors. People are like, these tend to be people who are successful in life. Recently, it feels like, because the managers, the executives, the people in positions of power and wealth and status tend to be cold, calculating, harmful, willing to step on other people to get ahead. A lot of times, amused at they find a lot of pleasure in mocking and ridiculing, just laughing at people who have a lot of personal character and principles and ethics and so on and so forth. And to be clear, right, there is a perspective that I don't think is necessarily entirely wrong. There is some objectivity in saying that, it's just more efficient to not care about other people. I don't endorse it, obviously. You can't tell. I obviously hate on a personal, normative level. I don't like that at all. Obviously, that's a very tame way of me expressing that. Fuck all that shit, But if I'm going to be more expressive and be more open about that, yeah. But it doesn't mean that they're not right in that. It's easier to acquire power if you care less about other people, and that should be obvious. But that kind of stunned a lot of people in the past 2020s till now, the past 5 years, the half decade. 2020, COVID starts. And then since then all the way till now, people have only been slowly learning, or some of them rapidly learning or knew already, but a lot of especially the youth, didn't realize how toxic they themselves could be, as well as their friends, as well as strangers. And a lot of poor souls out there who are kind of really naive or watching the public, and then myself was subject to the same thing, but at least I knew what it was like growing up in a downtown GTA era, downtown metropolitan area where there's a large population density of 6-7 million people. Even back when I was growing up, there's at least 3.5 million in this city alone. And I saw all sorts of crazy types of behavior when growing up. Jealousy, open discrimination and prejudice, but also a lot of victim mentality and self-pity. A lot of people crying wolf, right? So there's a lot of different types of very nasty behavior and very many different types of extremes. In modern day, you might say, the people who are really extreme in one end, who are kind of I guess in the late 2010s, some examples are extreme, I don't want to use it, but you're extreme incels, extreme feminists, extreme progressives, extreme protectionists and nationalists, extreme whatever, just people generally speaking who are very hostile towards an opposing viewpoint or perspective, and can't really hold a conversation civilly with the other party, and kind of devolve to some level of lunacy and cluster B tendencies are all there, right? Black and white thinking, splitting, paranoia, a lot of lack of responsibility or accountability. Splitting also involves one-sidedness, right? So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on, and so it's people are just we're realizing that again. And I was I was already well versed in this because this happened in the 90s when I grew up. I saw the worst of people: jealousy, envy, all 7 sins, deadly sins, although I'm not necessarily religious, right? Hatred everywhere you go, from all opposing sides, multiple perspectives, each person just hating. And then I suppose you could say I just hated people for behaving this way, for people could just be this full of hatred. Although, of course, I'd recognize that within myself, and I would grow out of that pretty quickly. But there's a lot of people who don't learn that, not even in their until they're 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s, and some people never learn, and some people know but they don't care. And so watching people have to relearn this again in the 2020s was very damning. And people over here in this episode, in this particular video by Deadly Nightshade, are kind of talking about that, right? So down here, Bugs and Mammoth, the best is confused enemy not confirmed directly. Again, I don't necessarily agree with all these people here. I'm just reading some of the comments. Benjamin here, look in the mirror and loving the person you see is the ultimate success. So this guy's taking more stoicism take, right? Integrity always wins, even if you can't see it at first. It's a religious one, actually. God bless. Someone here says unaccomplished people might win for short-term gain, but eventually everyone plays the piper of time, health, or wealth. So this one's taking more of a karmic approach, right? You reap what you sowed, eye for an eye, tit for tat. You hurt people will hurt you. right? So it's like what comes around goes around, fuck around and find out. That's kind of top speed motor cars approach. It's interesting because these two take a morality first approach, right? They would be, first one is taking more like a religious Christian kind of prophetic religion, sort of be a good person, a good child of God. The second comment is more about like karma. So, you know, good karma, bad karma, you hurt someone else, you're gonna pay with your health, with your wealth. You'll pay dearly in time. There's gonna be payback. You'll be punished. Over here, zombie machinery says the problem is the guy arrives early. This guy gives a personal experience. So he's just more personal. He's giving a personal, relatable story, right? I know exactly what to say to impress, never miss a chance to promote myself, but guess what? Some people hate him because they view him as a threat, because he's smart enough to know how to promote himself while still being good. And so even when you do everything right, things still fail. So things can still suck and be difficult when you do things in a good way, an effective way. So this is kind of like him sharing a story, giving something more personal rather than a spiritual karmic position. Sorry, I am sick. It's about energy. If you overwhelm yourselves at work, you lose your edge. Enough is enough. Sometimes say no. See where the real value is. Sometimes being a manager is only a deception. Be the one who enjoys the day while looking good. Life's not worth killing yourself for it. Sometimes say no. See where value. One enjoys the day while. It's like general proverbs here when it comes to the fourth one. All right, so let's get into the actual meat of today. Right, so that's some general comments here. So we're gonna dive into the kind of back and forth. This is some argument here between me and another person, and it didn't really want it to turn into an argument, but it seemed like he definitely wanted to challenge the original post, and I ended up just giving something as a side matter of supporting him. And then suddenly I was like, whoa, this is coming with he's lashing out in a way almost. He doesn't like what I said and he wanted to say something about it. So then I said, oh, you know what? Let's go with it. Then let's see what he has to say. And let's try to see if we can provide a clearer picture about what we think, and also ourselves trying to understand them. Okay? So the original post here was narcissism and cluster Bs are running rampant, having conscience and empathy is becoming rare. So the other one was karmic, and another one was spiritual and like religious, like prophetic religious. And another one was kind of like personal stories. And this one is definitely more like a statement of like sobering, like disgust, right? It's just like these guys are running everywhere, and it just sucks. But you know, people with conscience and empathy are becoming rare. But it's more, it could also be more as an observation. We don't know what kind of tone of voice Happy Camper is speaking from, right? I mean, even his voice is Happy Camper, so it's like Happy Camper says narcissism, cluster B are running rampant, having conscience and empathy are becoming rare. It could just be a statement, right? So, you know, people are like, indeed, once this happened, where it was, or so then this pops up. Maze Debaki says, better question to challenge your comment. Okay. So is empathy rare, or does the environment you live in play a role in shaping whether or not one can thrive in such an environment with or without empathy? And it's like 2 question marks. Let me read that again with a little bit more of a more like a gradual build, a slower pace, sorry. Is empathy rare, or does the environment you live in play a role in shaping whether or not one can thrive in such an environment with or without empathy? The obvious question is, well, both are true. Yeah, empathy can be rare, and yes, the environment also plays a role in, you know, shaping whether you can thrive in it. because there are people who don't obviously need empathy, right? We have a lot of antisocial people in society, actually, without, you know, saying that they are ASP. I mean, they don't have to be antisocial personality disorder. They can just have antisocial traits, right? Those are general, statistically average person who has, you know, some selfishness and some rage, some emotionally volatile, and you know, kind of like an asshole, right? There are people like that, and they don't have to be that 5% of society. They don't have to be that 5% of the population. There's a sizable proportion of the average normal statistic person, maybe like 1 in 4, like 20 to 30% of people have that kind of tendency where they're gonna be obnoxious, right? They don't give a shit when they go out there and like say something that's kind of rude or demeaning or insulting to someone else, sometimes just for fun, and they don't give a shit, right? That's general antisocial behavior without saying that they're disordered, right? There's a lot of people like that, and you know, depending on the environment that you grew up in, or maybe on the kind of beliefs you have, right? Is empathy really necessary? Well, clearly not for the people who, this sizable proportion of, whether it's a minority, I would say is definitely like even if it's small, it's a significant proportion of the population, right? It could be a minority population, but still it's sizable enough. It's a large minority. Like I said, like 1 in 4, it's like 25%. That's like a quarter of people don't care about being open assholes and just being a dick to other people. They don't care, or they enjoy it more than they do about your own well-being or whatever, right? He goes further and says, you know, after proposing the question, I recently started to realize all answers are correct, because whatever your reality is what will be what you believe. Therefore, such answers are reflected. That's true, right? That's just confirmation bias. Maybe the things you see in others are really hidden within yourself. Also true. Or maybe your environment has way too many trauma-ridden folks who lack empathy due to years of neglect and unresolved issues of their own, driving others to come across them and mold into something similar. So they attract people like that because they're broken individuals that they haven't resolved. And these people shouldn't be judged badly. They aren't bad. They aren't bad. Just fighting their own internal storm, right? So it's of quite a, you know, empathic take in some ways, right? It's kind of understanding, right? You shouldn't judge them badly. They aren't bad, actually. You just find their internal storm. That last statement, I would say, is that's where I have some disagreement with, for sure, right? And then I would say, you know, I'm not sure if that's a very practical way to live, of course. I know, though, recently that people have been really judgmental, but the type of judgment is very important, right? Because we do have to discern, and that's where my argument's going to come into play here. I also feel that the question that he posed, is it rare, or is it just something that, you know, you kind of need? So there's some implication here that you don't really need empathy. It's just you need empathy, right? Because of the environment that you're in, or because of you personally. But a lot of people don't need empathy, and that could come from more of a it could be more of a projection, right? Maybe Moz doesn't have that himself, and he's wondering why you feel you need to have that. Or maybe it's just an objective question to challenge, right? Regardless of whether or not they have it or not. So we go further down, I go, you know, so I comment on Moz, I see that, and I say, you know, I want to add to it, and say that, you know, if you're going to challenge the original post, I'm going to also say, you know, there's got to be a leveling ground here, right? I'm going to counter that a little bit, to try and give some evenness to it. So it becomes important. This comment I left two. One was directed towards him, and one was just kind of on its own. The first one is, it becomes important, right? I say, it becomes important. I'm not sure if the music's still playing. Okay, it is still playing. So it becomes important to discern those who are recovering from difficult circumstances with an appropriate amount of self-restraint from those who are actively engaging in hurting others out of sheer naivety or schadenfreude, which is like the pleasure of hurting people, right? Like taking pleasure in someone else's pain. That's the German term from schadenfreude. Furthermore, there comes a point of threshold where one loses too much accountability and self-responsibility, and in turn becomes the next thorn in the cycle, causing too much irreparable damage to be overlooked or openly forgiven. Of course, if you take, again, perpetrators, bullies, people who are highly abusive, a lot of them who are cluster B personalities, again, with a lot of very malicious intent for either their own insecurity of image, which is the narcissist, or because they just don't have the neural hardwiring to actually care for another individual. They just lack that fundamentally as a psychopath. Others who have certain types of genetic traits that, you know, whether through a biologically evolutionary standpoint, brings out the sadism in them, so they actually, or it could be, you know, developed through the environment that they were brought up in, so they're modeling after, or maybe it was selected for the environment in the sense that they would not benefit from this because, let's say, they're down in the real slum ghetto of Detroit, and you know there's sex, drugs, violence everywhere you go. That will not foster empathy in any sort of way. Some people will, you know, directly, deliberately go against it because they see a better way, and they say, you know, that's not the way. But then also there are a lot of people who see, you know, this is the only way. If they're going to be parasitic and sadistic and full of vanity and hostility, then I need to be hostile too, because it's only a losing game. If you're kind, people will take advantage of you. So if everyone's awful, then it doesn't pay for you to be kind. You have to be awful too, because you got to put your stake in being, you know, powerless in a position where everyone else has power only leads you to being abused and used, right? So there's that perspective. So whether it's like born sociopathy, whether it's grown, from the environment, sociopathy, whether it's born with psychopathy, whether it's from insecurity of upbringing and development, which is narcissism in terms of the image, right? The self-image, loving oneself in excess to compensate for the fact that everyone has tried to make you small, and you use maladaptive techniques. And then another one is like, you know, a highly manipulative person like Machiavelli, right? Not Machiavelli himself, but you know, some examples of that. So, you know, I say that's what I'm referring to in the second statement, right? There are people like that who, and you see a lot of these examples in society. I've had people come up to me and come up to other strangers I walk and observe on the train, right? Whether it's a couple trying to use the love that they have between them and trying to rub it in the face of a person who they believe is single. It doesn't matter if that person has been in a marriage or another relationship or successful for a very long time. They'll use it to try to make the person feel small with the love that they have, which is ironic, because if you have love, you probably don't deserve it if that's the way you're going to use your love to tear other people down. Other people, I've had a lot of women come up to me, and to just men in general, have this paranoid lunacy, because I'm assuming, and I'm going to turn it right around, there were also a lot of really awful men who were really pathetic, like almost like everywhere they go, they feel like they need to grovel and they need to like give something or play a certain game, be almost like a pickup artist. It's kind of really nasty and slimy to try to like almost like just literally get into a woman's pants. It's like, and they can't handle rejection, and they give gifts and consistently try to feel like they deserve something from women, and then to the point then these women become corrupted by that, and then they go and they're hostile towards men in general, just like these men here are kind of like eventually become bitter and resentful and hostile towards women. And then there was the same thing politically speaking, from between like different fields of politics, right? One is a very resource intensive consuming industry, a lot of social work heavy, inclusion, diversity kind of stuff, and then the other opposite end of politics saying that, you know, people need to work. It's all about responsibility purely. You don't, you know, if you don't actually earn any money, it's because you're just lazy. It's very inconsiderate. It's very cold and calculated, and ignores all the variables in life that you can consider for. And so there's a lot of these extremes going back and forth that I watched in society kind of implode. And a lot of these extremes of people would consistently harass other people who they perceive to be their opposing perspective or view. And what ended up happening is, I got fed up with that, obviously. And, whether they were old or young, gay or straight, men or women, boys or girls, whatever race, Chinese, black, Filipino, Latinos, I didn't give a shit. Anyone who behaved that way, I was looking with the character on the inside, the capacity for rational thinking, decision making, emotional regulation, emotional maturity, proper wisdom, in development and all that kind of stuff, security in terms of love and companionship, integrity, responsibility, instead of the opposite, right? Like I listed all those things like manipulation, pettiness, bitterness, resentment, anger, rage, vanity, narcissism, hostility, malice, psychopathy, so on and so forth, right? The flip side of what would be a developed, matured individual who can conduct themselves without, harming others or pulling other people under the ground through the mud, versus someone who is actually capable of being secure and stable in their own right, understanding that they don't actually deserve necessarily anything beyond the basic decent needs, which still are not guaranteed by life, and so you have to work for that. And of course, it's still not guaranteed, and it's not really a reason for you to lash out, though. Okay? And it's difficult, right? It is difficult. It's not easy at all, because nobody has to be born into this. Not everyone wants to play this game. Definitely sympathize with that, right? And so that's what that kind of statement is, like, and then further beyond, I said I agree with the general thought behind your comment, right? It's meant to speak dialectically, and I feel like I made a mistake here because I thought I understood what he was trying to say. I thought he was just trying to kind of counteract, but it turns out he was trying to make a bigger point. He had it seems like he had his own kind of perspective he wanted to really go in on. It's meant to speak dialectically and provide a more objective take, which I appreciate. That's what I thought. Therefore, I will counter that by saying that some people are truly beyond the point of no return. Right? I'm saying not everyone is deserving of that kind of, you're trying to say that not everyone can be judged so poorly. You can't, people shouldn't be judged badly. And I didn't like that statement, right? Because I said there are people you absolutely should judge poorly. We're not going to excuse, you being a cluster B personality and ruining innocent people's lives just because you've been through something rough yourself. So going further down, right, I also added to the comment of the original poster themselves. So yeah, and they rear their heads every couple decades through our history, these antisocial and, these generally cluster B tendencies, people with cluster B tendencies, self-entitlement, victim mentality, and victim blaming, lack of self-awareness, corruption, a lot of bitterness and pettiness, vindictiveness, wanting to seek revenge, hostile paranoia, constantly attacking people, thinking that people are trying to spite them out, right? A lot of malice, a lot of insecurity that leads to an overinflated ego, which is vanity and narcissism at its core, right? Trying to make other people feel small and inferior so that you feel superior, right? So these things rear their heads every couple of decades. You could say generation, every 1 or 2 generations, it shows up again because the next generation is a child and they grow and then they're going to make the same mistakes. And it's unfortunate, but that's true. And so it's nothing new, of course. As a result, we each have our own important decisions to make on how to address, approach, avoid, and assert against such sadistic and parasitic personalities and trending dysfunctional behaviors. Happens through history, it's nothing new, but as a result, I really want to shift, speaking to the main post, right? It's kind of like a statement. They're running it rampant, they're everywhere. Good-natured empathy and compassion are rare. And then so I want to say, yes, and there's something we can do about that. I want to provide some sense of encouragement, say that you still have the strength, you still have power, you still have the capacity to make decisions and the ability to almost like fight back and protect against these sorts of cluster Bs, right? So, it was meant to be in that way.